Expedition 33 has been touted as an evolution for JRPG type games and the next step for turn-based combat. However, I think in comparing it directly to Atlus's most recent turn-based hit, Metaphor Refantazio, we can quickly tell that there may be something wrong with that idea. Turn-based combat is a system as old as time itself, and Metaphor almost feels like the most pure evolution of it. Here's what I mean by that. In one of the very first turn-based games, Dragon Quest, you couldn't even choose the specific enemy you wanted to attack. You'd select your moves, prepare for the enemies, and watch as everything played out. Fast forward a couple hundred years to Metaphor, and that's still mostly how the game goes. You still choose your moves, prep for the enemy, and watch it all play out. At the most basic level, the combat remains unchanged, and by extension, pure. However, it's because of this similar design that some problems can begin to occur. There are two fundamental hurdles that all great turn-based games must overcome. First is what I like to call the standby rule. In turn-based combat, generally speaking, you are going to get hit. There's no way to avoid that. Wait, hold on, don't worry, I'll get to the specifics in a second, don't comment just yet. Oh, but while you're down there, you might as well subscribe. By virtue of being turn-based, your opposition must also, well, take a turn. And when they do, you will get hit. This directly causes the second fundamental hurdle, the attacking and healing rule. Since there's no way to avoid getting hit, you're effectively forced to heal when you're not healthy and attack when you are. The reason this isn't the case in non-turn-based games is your ability to simply lock in and stop getting hit. In theory, if you're an absolutely perfect player with perfect reaction times, knowledge of all the potential traps, and the Sharingan, you could get through Elden Ring without getting hit a single time. The same is not true for a turn-based game like Dragon Quest or Metaphor. Yet despite these fundamental problems, there are still plenty of games with outstanding turn-based combat. So how do they do it? Well, there are two methods. Either you can adapt to these hurdles and build your game around them, or you can reject them entirely and create a system where they do not exist. Let's start with that first option. Obviously, you still can't move during the enemy's turn in Metaphor, but you can prepare for that turn. The easiest way to illustrate this point is by showing you a team from early in the game. This team is made of 3 party members, Stroll, Hulkenberg, and the protagonist, who we're just gonna call Will to save time. Now speaking of Will, he plays the role of a healer and a mage. Naturally then, he's not going to last long if enemies target him. We can avoid this potential negative outcome by using Hulkenberg's skill, Knight's Proclamation. She's a tank, and this skill ensures that any single target attacks that were directed at Will or Stroll will go to her instead. Thanks to this, even though we can't necessarily dodge on reaction, we can still avoid damage with preparation. Next, we can look at how it overcomes the attacking and healing rule. We can already get an idea of this thanks to the skills available to the player like Knight's Proclamation, but Metaphor takes things a step further by borrowing a system from its older sibling, the Shin Megami Tensei series, Press Turns. This aims to add in a mechanic so powerful that healing isn't necessarily your only option in dire situations. Let me explain. Upon completing specific actions, you gain an extra turn. HP still remains the single most important resource, since without it, you lose. But now, thanks to this Press Turn system, there's a genuine debate to be had on what choice is the correct one when your health is low. Maybe the right answer is to just heal up and prepare for the incoming attacks, but maybe instead you'll choose to exploit the enemy's weakness and first gain yourself an extra turn. This gets infinitely more complex when you consider the number of skills and the variety in what they can do. I mean, think about it. Going back to that same team from earlier, let's say it's Will's turn. He can either heal or he can do something else. His health is low, so you might think that healing is the right option, but what if we exploit the enemy's weakness to light using his Mage Light skill, gain an extra turn, and then use that extra turn for Hulkenberg's Knight's Proclamation? Will's low health doesn't matter anymore because he's not going to get hit. Why stop there though? What if we follow up Will's attack with yet another weakness from Hulkenberg, then use Stroll's powerful single target damage to end the fight altogether? See, there are these branching paths that you can go down, and the right answer is going to actively change depending not just on your party and their builds, but the opponents that they find themselves against. All of this barely even scratches the surface when it comes to the complexity and options in Metaphor's combat, and it's thanks to this that despite being turn-based, it doesn't have to fall into those fundamental traps. So that's one potential method of tackling these hurdles, but Clair Obscur shows us another. If Metaphor is adapting to and jumping over those figurative hurdles, Clair takes a much more straightforward route by simply knocking them down. It's all thanks to the parry and dodging system. You know how I said when an enemy attacks in a turn-based game, you just have to sit there and watch? Well, not in this one. You could probably do a completely hitless run of Expedition 33 if you were good enough. I am not, but in theory, it may be possible. Clair Obscur plays like a rhythm game, especially later on with enemies that can swing for what feels like a dozen hits in a row. The game didn't simply take turn-based combat and add dodging though. These additions were made very carefully and deliberately. First, there's the fact that dodging and parrying are two different actions with 2 levels of difficulty attached. Dodging is significantly easier than parrying and acts almost like a tutorial or practice mode as you learn the timing for parrying attacks. Now, why would you want to learn how to parry if dodging is easier? It's because when you parry, it does this. Outside of being one of the coolest things of all time, it's this game of risk-reward that makes the system work so well. The reward for parrying is great, sure, but the risk involved is pretty substantial considering the enemies in this game are designed around this dodging and parrying system. They know you can avoid attacks, so they have to hit harder than enemies in normal turn-based games to compensate. Parrying and dodging wasn't added onto an already complete turn-based combat system to fix it. The combat was instead crafted with this idea in mind. Each time a monster prepares an attack, you have a split-second decision on whether you want to go for that high-risk, high-reward option, or just play it safe with some dodges in hopes that you can make up for that damage that you would have gotten from a successful parry in other ways. This real-time nature doesn't just apply to defense though, it works offensively too. All of your skills have timed button presses that can enhance their effects. This is usually an increase in damage or healing, and sometimes it propagates a buff to the entire party instead of a single target. There's also the free aim system that allows you to aim and shoot at enemies to weaken them or deal a bit of extra damage. Some enemies will even avoid nearly all of your normal attacks, only being vulnerable to these ranged shots. What makes this system especially cool is the fact that you actually have to aim in real time. This isn't like Persona where you just mash a button and empty the clip. No, certain spots take more damage than others, and tragically, as I very quickly learned, despite the fact that the target is standing still, you can still miss. Okay, look, maybe you can't miss, but some of us have found a way. The point is, these systems completely shatter those fundamental hurdles that many previous turn-based games had to work around. This may make you think Expedition 33 is the clear winner, but this is just one part of the combat. There's also the fact that this doesn't necessarily make the combat better, but we'll get to that in a bit. For now, let's take that idea and toss it into a folder for later. You see, the wonderful part about turn-based combat, and my personal favorite aspect of it, lies in preparation and team building. A defining quality of JRPGs is their complexity. Half of the experience in these games is just math and tables, especially if you're aiming for the biggest numbers. Due to this fact, I won't go too in-depth on either game's systems, but instead attempt to explain their fundamentals, which while slightly different, do lead to the same general goals. Metaphor's combat revolves around 3 mechanics that all work together to create one of my favorite turn-based combat systems of all time. First up are the archetypes. We need to understand these before we can get into the other two. Assuming you've played a game like Final Fantasy V before, archetypes are basically just a job system. If you haven't played a game like Final Fantasy V, well, first of all, you should, it's great, but to keep things brief, a job in an RPG grants your character certain stats and abilities that allow them to play a specific role in combat. So for example, the Knight archetype in Metaphor grants skills and stats based on defense and preservation. The Mage, on the other hand, focuses purely on elemental damage and aims to exploit enemies' weaknesses whenever they can. What makes Metaphor so cool is that while each character has their own main archetype, as you might call it, every character in the game can use every other character's archetypes. There are also multiple bonus archetypes that you can unlock through side content. Second, we can take a look at inherited skills. These are exactly what they sound like. They're skills that you can inherit from one archetype to another. So if I'm using Stroll's warrior archetype, a class that focuses on high physical damage, I could switch Stroll to a mage for a while, level him up, unlock a few magic skills, and then give those to his warrior archetype as inherited skills. Now I've got a warrior who can exploit elemental weaknesses by casting spells. This allows for effectively infinite combinations of archetypes and skills. Stroll can be a warrior with magic, or a thief with buffs, or a knight with healing. The list practically goes on forever. Keep in mind too, this level of customization exists in every single character. The third and final mechanic is the synthesis system. These are special combo moves that can only be used when 2 specific archetypes are present, and they're some of the most powerful skills in the game. They can single-handedly alter the course of an entire fight, so naturally, it's extremely beneficial to build your team with them in mind. This is where it all comes full circle. Your choices in archetype will be altered by your synthesis skills, and the inherited abilities you're capable of using will be based on the archetypes that you've used in the past. I love all the options here as they really ask you to consider what each archetype is capable of and which one would fit best on your team. It's an absolutely brilliant system that allows your party to feel like one cohesive unit, and perhaps more importantly, a unit that you've manifested entirely from your own imagination. Believe it or not, preparation and team building in Clair Obscur is actually pretty similar to Metaphor. There is one key difference though. So Clair's combat also revolves around 3 mechanics. We can lump Pictos and Luminas in together since they're effectively the same thing and start with those. They alter your abilities in battle and act almost like passives that you use to solidify your character's role. What makes Luminas so special is their ability to synergize with each other and create a party that, despite lacking the synthesis skills of Metaphor, feels just as cohesive. Let me hit you with a quick example. So these are 2 Luminas called Burning Shots and Critical Burn. Burning Shots lets these free aim shots that I mentioned earlier cause the burn status effect, while Critical Burn increases your crit chance on burning enemies. So for this combo, I gave Gustav Burning Shots so that he could apply the status effect with his free aim shots, then gave Critical Burn to my primary DPS, Lune. Now, by the time it's her turn, the enemy is likely already burned and she can hit even harder. Little combos like these are all over the game, and they feel like an extremely organic form of synergy in team building. You'll find yourself considering which Luminas each party member has and how they can interact with and potentially elevate the rest. The second mechanic is the skills system. These, much like the archetype skills in Metaphor, are special moves that cost AP, a resource that regenerates after each battle and when attacking or using certain skills. There are far fewer options here when compared to Metaphor, but that's okay, and you'll see why when we get to the third mechanic. Even with less options though, that doesn't mean the customization here isn't still outstanding. Each character has their own personal skill tree that's filled with skills that'll gradually build them into one specific role. Mael, for example, has skills like Guard Up and Egid. The former will raise the defense of the entire party, and the latter is just Knight's Proclamation for Metaphor, shielding allies from harm and taking attacks for them. Because of this, Mael might seem like the quintessential tank, and she certainly could be, but she's also got access to skills like Momentum Strike, a pure damage skill that can hit even harder under certain conditions, or Offensive Switch to lower an enemy's defense. So maybe she's a pure DPS. The choice is totally yours to make. What really impresses me about this system is how intricate a lot of these skills are, and a large part of that intricacy comes from the final mechanic, the roles. This is less of a single mechanic and more of an idea that permeates through the entire game and creates a ton of individual mechanics. Let's take a look at Mael's stance change. She's got 3 stances: defensive, offensive, and virtuose. In defensive stance, she gains more AP and takes less damage. In offensive, she both deals and takes more damage. And in virtuose, she deals even more damage than an offensive stance without the defensive debuff. This stance change system naturally plays into what kind of role you'll have her play. You can use the buffs of defensive stance to be a perfect tank, or focus on offensive and virtuose to deal as much damage as possible. Each character has some kind of mechanic like this, and it leads to this incredible level of depth in how you choose to build each character and what role they'll end up playing. Now, the one key difference here is especially important, so lock in and focus up. The archetypes of Metaphor are exceptional, and while the Picto and Lumina system is brilliant, Expedition 33 is a bit smaller in scale when it comes to customization next to Metaphor. This is both a positive and a negative at the same time. As much as I love the customization in Metaphor, I would be lying if I said it couldn't get a bit overwhelming sometimes. I mean, to unlock one of the last archetypes, you need to follow a flowchart that looks like this. No, this is not a joke. If you've played the game, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There are just so many moving parts here. It's cool that any character can play any role, but that also means that you have to build all of these roles yourself, and there are going to be some people who bounce off of a system like that. Expedition 33 may be smaller, but it's nice that I can look at Lune's available skills, see that she's got a lot of DPS abilities, and just decide that I'm going to make her into a super weapon powerful enough to sink the entire continent that the game takes place on. The other enormous benefit Expedition 33 has that is not necessarily a result of its smaller scale lies in the ability to respec your characters. If you decide that you don't like the skills you have right now, you can simply reset and try something else. Ultimately, both systems aim for the goal of giving the player as much control as possible when it comes to what your team will look like in the end and what kind of roles they'll play throughout. Now, while combat is an extremely significant part of both of these games, it's not all there is to the gameplay. The structure of these games is so dramatically different that they might as well be considered different genres. It starts with the little things. MP in Metaphor is a limited resource that's difficult to replenish. The equivalent in Clair Obscur, AP, is restored at the start of each battle and increased throughout to use more powerful skills. This may seem insignificant, but consider the fact that in Clair you can use your most powerful moves in any given fight without having to worry about the next one. You can always go all out. In Metaphor, that isn't the case. Your MP is limited, so you have to more carefully consider when to pull out all the stops and when to play a bit more reserved and carefully. Clair is a more open game, where you explore the overworld and primarily progress through completing dungeons. Metaphor also has dungeons, but they, much like the entire game, are on a timer. It's not literally a clock that counts down as you play, but instead a calendar system where each task that you do takes a certain amount of in-game time. Let's say you have 10 days before the deadline. Exploring a mini dungeon will use up one of those 10 days, as will most other activities. This may be the most significant difference between the two in regards to gameplay, and it's going to be a deal breaker for a lot of people. This is where we can start to see a trend develop in the comparison of both of these games, and it's a trend that will become even more clear when we look at the stories. When discussing preparation, I mentioned scale. This is an idea that stretches well beyond the gameplay and is much more significant in the stories of both games. To put it simply, Metaphor is a substantially longer game than Clair Obscur. It has more towns, more characters, more enemies, and a much longer story. Clair might take you around 30 hours to beat, while Metaphor can be up to 100 or more. In taking a closer look at the scale of both, we can see the advantages and disadvantages that come with their chosen paths. Now, don't worry, I won't talk too much about specific details here since I don't want to spoil either story. I'll instead focus on more broad and hypothetical examples. I might say something like a character will get very angry and crash out by attacking the party just to illustrate a point, but that exact event doesn't actually happen in-game. This'll make more sense when we get there. Just know that outside of the premise of both games, there will be no spoilers. The biggest biggest advantage that comes with a longer game is the ability to spend more time on specific things without hurting the pacing. Ideally, a game's pacing would look like this, a smooth line from the start to the end. Now, if we zoom in on this line, we can see bumps here and there. Each of these bumps represents a point where you have to stop progressing the story for a moment to do something else, like a side quest or even a mini dungeon. The shorter the game, the shorter this line is going to be, and the shorter the line is, the more noticeable those bumps will become. If a 2-hour game has a section where you have to spend one of those 2 hours talking to a single character, that single character better be pretty important, since if they're not, the line would look something like this. If, however, the game was 60 hours long, the 1 hour you spend with that single character suddenly isn't anywhere near as harmful to the pacing since it can be spread out far more evenly. Maybe you'll spend 5 minutes with them at the start of the game, another 10 or 15 at hour 20, and so on. This allows each individual character to have their own story arc that you get to experience alongside them, and that's exactly what happens in Metaphor. Thanks to the length of the game, you're able to spend far more time with each of these characters compared to a game like Expedition 33. You get to learn about their past, their present, and their future, as you not only gain new insights into how they got here, but even get to experience solo side stories with just them. Due to Clair Obscur's length and the urgency of their mission, you're not going to join CL on a quick day trip to a nearby town and try out their local delicacies while discussing your past. However, where Clair does excel is its efficiency. Relative to a longer RPG like Metaphor or Xenoblade, you don't have anywhere near as much time to spend with these characters, yet they use that time extraordinarily well. Each scene is packed with little details that help develop these characters. For example, one character will have a nightmare and wake up screaming, and every other character in the party will display a different reaction that shows you who they are instead of telling you. Maybe one will be concerned and empathetic, another will be paranoid that they're making too much noise, one might sleep through the whole ordeal. I'm making most of this up, but you get the idea. That's not to say that you don't know the backstory of any of these characters, since you absolutely do. It's instead to say that the game knows it only has a certain amount of time, and so it uses that time extremely wisely. There's not a word that doesn't need to be said, nor an action that doesn't convey some kind of meaningful detail. It's entirely possible that Expedition 33's characters could have been better if the game was twice as long, but crucially, the game didn't need that extra time, which is kind of fitting considering the actual premise of Expedition 33. So the premise of both of these games is very different, and it leads to two games that have wildly divergent tones to them. One game is about the dark and oppressing reality that we all find ourselves in every day, a world in which we must follow rules we didn't create and a system that will inevitably be the end of all of us, all while we're forced to play along in some twisted individual's grand scheme, like puppets on a string. It's a game about politics. The other game is Expedition 33. Jokes aside, Expedition 33 is a game about reaching this big 33 right here and stopping a being known as the Paintress from wiping out humanity by slowly erasing the population based on their age. This has been counting down since the number 100, and at the end of the year, everyone at age 33 will vanish. So time is obviously of the essence. It's far darker and more somber than Metaphor. I've been playing games for something like 20 years now, and while I do explicitly avoid horror games by virtue of being the biggest coward on the face of the earth, Expedition 33 still had some of the darkest things I've ever seen in a game. It was a world so merciless and grim that I almost had to stop playing at times since the melancholic and hopeless nature of it all was just too much. The scenes you're faced with throughout the game, not just the cutscenes but the environments and what this game was willing to show, were a lot. Yet that's the beautiful part about Expedition 33. Amidst all of these despair-inducing set pieces is a profound sense of wonder and even hope. Metaphor, on the other hand, is nowhere near as dark, or at the very least it doesn't wear that macabre nature on its sleeve like Expedition 33 does. It's a game about saving the country and becoming the king, by winning a magical election. There are sad moments in Metaphor and there are some seriously dark themes here, but you won't see bodies twisted and contorted as the agony of their final moments are ever preserved in their charred remains. Metaphor is a bit more lighthearted. It's a story about an adventure across the country as our cast of quirky characters does their best to change the world for the better. Furthermore, Metaphor's setting is a more fantastical one. It takes place in this fantasy world with races like the Clamar who have these horns on their head, the animal hybrids known as the Parapus, and the rat like Ujif. Expedition 33, on the other hand, is just in France. Sure, there was a major disaster and the characters can use magic, but this is supposed to be Earth. This is completely subjective, and it's going to come down to what you're feeling at the moment and what you're capable of tolerating in games. For some, this is going to be that evolution and what they think the genre should be, and for others, it won't. It's totally your call, and that's a trend that we see through nearly every aspect of both of these games. So is Expedition 33 better than Metaphor, and more broadly, is it an evolution of the genre? Well, allow me to answer that question with a story. In 2023, I played an indie game called Chained Echoes. It was a game that removed all of my biggest problems with JRPGs at the time. It felt in many ways like a direct response to the genre and its potential flaws. There were no random encounters, grinding was minimal, the reimagined turn-based combat was outstanding, the list goes on. Clair Obscur in many ways feels almost exactly the same. Turn-based combat is more active thanks to the parry and dodging system, the game is significantly shorter and more manageable relative to the colossal time investments of games like Persona and Dragon Quest, and the story is extremely human and more grounded than most other entries in the genre. I mean, it takes place on Earth with relatively normal humans, while something like Xenoblade has robots and characters with blue flaming hair or wings on their head. And yet, much like Chained Echoes, plenty of people will dislike this game for the very same reasons that myself and others love it. This is where we can finally open up that folder from earlier. Turn-based games hold a very special place in my heart, and a large part of that is because of how familiar and almost relaxing they are. It's directly because of this comforting nature that I actually don't enjoy challenge in turn-based games all that much. Expedition 33's combat is exhilarating, it's frustrating, it's frantic and thrilling all at the same time. It's intoxicating in ways that you won't fully understand until you play the game yourself, and I absolutely love it. Despite this fact, I still enjoy it about as much, if not a bit less, than something like Dragon Quest, because Dragon Quest is none of those things. I can launch the game, turn off my brain, and just relax. Clair Obscur's pacing is borderline miraculous considering the genre, but I really do enjoy spending that extra time with the characters. The longer journey of Metaphor ends up feeling more like a proper adventure when compared to Clair, which feels more like an urgent mission with a clear and focused goal. As much as I love Expedition 33 and the changes that it makes to the genre, I think calling it a direct upgrade or an evolution is the wrong way to look at things. I see this game as a step in a different direction. It's not better or worse than Metaphor and other turn-based classics that have come before it. It's just another path. An absolutely phenomenal, incredible, life-changingly good path, yet just a path regardless. As of right now, I think I might prefer Metaphor just a bit more, but if you've never played a JRPG before, or even a turn-based game, there exist very few, if any, better places to start than Expedition 33. Okay, the video's basically over, so you can ignore this next part. I just want to do something funny real quick. So, you thought you could skip to the end of the video and get a quick and easy answer. Why don't you go ahead and take a seat over there? Let's talk a bit about instant gratification. No, I'm just messing with you. I'll give you the answer in a few seconds, but remember, the only person you're cheating here is yourself. You really should go back and watch the whole thing for context. Anyway, Xenoblade X.